Hello and welcome to the Power of Asking for Help. My name is Juliet Atkinson and this is an adapted recorded version of a webinar that was delivered live on the 28th of April. The invitation in this recording is to reflect upon the power of asking for help. So how is it that asking for help can sometimes feel so difficult? How could we be getting in our own way? And how can it be a strength to ask for help? What can be the benefits to ourselves and to others? How is it that we can go about asking for help in a way that feels comfortable and authentic to ourselves? And what are the pitfalls to avoid? So as we go into this recording, to get the most out of it, I would invite you to dedicate this time to yourself. So set aside, shut down any distractions, and also have a pen and paper handy as we'll be doing some journaling exercises, and you may want to take some notes. So when we think about asking for help, why is it that it can sometimes be so hard to ask? Now, if we think about the situation that we've been in for over the past year now of the pandemic, of being in lockdown, of being on curfews, of having our lives turned upside down, both professionally and personally, has there been a time when you really wished that you'd asked for help? So I'm going to invite you into a reflective exercise to get started. Think about a time over the past year when you really wished that you'd asked for help and you didn't. So what was it that got in the way? What was it that stopped you? And how did that make you feel? So take a moment now just to have a think about that. Write anything down that comes up for you if you wish to. And also, if you wish to, you can take a few moments just to pause this recording if you need a little bit of time to reflect upon this question. So when you thought about this reflective question, what got in the way of asking for help and how that made you feel, what was that? So how typically can we get in our own way when it comes to asking for help? Is it pride? Is it fear? Well, it could be a little bit of both of those. It could be our own fears of looking foolish, our own fears of bothering somebody else, our own fears of being rejected or being accepted and then being let down. Or, is it that we may feel that, actually, I really should be able to do this myself. And yikes, what if I look at it as if I'm not particularly good at my job? So those are a few examples of how we can get in our own way. But if you think about the reflective question and what came up for you, what assumptions could you have been making? And what judgments or labels could you have been putting on this situation? What were the assumptions that you were making about the other person? What were the assumptions that you were making about yourself? So take a moment again just to have a think about that and how perhaps our assumptions, our beliefs, our judgments, our labels could be limiting us. And Brene Brown, a research professor, you may have seen her wonderful TED talk on the power of vulnerability. In an interview that she had fairly recently, when talking about asking for help, she said, when you cannot accept and ask for help without self-judgment, then when you offer other people help, you are always doing so with judgment. Ouch. So again, when we're stopping asking for help, how are our assumptions, judgments, beliefs getting in our own way? So that was a little bit of food for thought to get you started in the reflection around asking for help. And the reason why I wanted to share this theme with you and invite you into this reflective exercise on asking for help was really to open the door to this idea of asking each other for help more. And why is that? So first of all, for me personally, it's out of personal conviction. I've never in my career, in my work, done anything really good without other people. And my experience also over the years is that when I've invested in my relationships, when I've invested in my network, and that I've built good working relationships with people, that's really opened the doors to opportunities, but it's also opened the doors to great collaboration. And with great collaboration, you really do have the opportunity to get things done, whether they be creating ideas, managing projects, helping you along in your career, working with other people with whom you have great relationships is really an opportunity to work with much greater speed and intelligence in my own experience. So that was my personal view. I think the other thing that, given the context that we're living in right now, when we look at the pandemic, it's really quite a salutary reminder of how interdependent and interconnected we all are. And like it or not, we really are responsible for one another. And it's in this sense of responsibility and respecting the rules, and respecting social distancing, wearing masks and getting vaccinated and so on, is, we're not only protecting ourselves, but we're also protecting others as well, and showing our sense of responsibility towards one another. Now, if we look at this image here of a beautiful forest, we can also perhaps think about nature and how we can inspire ourselves from nature, and the idea of ecosystem. And when we think about a forest and how they function, it really is quite fascinating. So it's commonly known now that trees actually talk to each other. And the elderly trees, who are also known as hub trees, they actually share information, wisdom, nutrition, and warnings where needed with the rest of the forest. And they do this not above ground, but actually below ground in an ecosystem of roots and a symbiotic relationship with fungi. So if you want to know more about that, then there's some fantastic TED Talks on how trees talk to each other. There's also a great book by Peter Walben on the hidden life of trees as well, if you want to know a little bit more about that and inspire yourself from nature. So all of that to just have some food for thought around, what if in our working lives, in our careers, we were to think less about hero stories and battles and so on, and to think more about nurturing one another, keeping an eye out for one another, offering one another a helping hand. How is it that we can be caring and benevolent with one another and raise ideas, careers, and projects with groups of people? And what if asking for help was seen as a strength? What changes for you when you ask yourself that question? And all it needed was a little bit of courage, perhaps a little leap of faith, and the humility to get out of our own way and to ask, but also the wisdom to accept help from other people. And speaking of wisdom, I'm going to invite you now into a wisdom exercise. It's a journaling exercise. If you haven't done journaling before, it's a writing exercise that can be really powerful. Really encourage you to experiment with journaling. What you will need is your pen and paper handy. Something to use as a timer, so an alarm would probably be helpful in some way, and give yourself 1 minute for each of the following 3 questions, and you make sure that you respect the 1 minute time limit for each question, so you're going to be writing for 3 minutes in total. And just write as fast as you can, and don't stop writing. That's the key thing. Do not stop writing. So whatever comes up for you, just let it come up. Don't think, if you don't know what to write, then just write, I don't know what to write. But make sure that you keep going. So imagine you could ask anyone for help, and if you wish to here, you can go back to the situation that you evoked right at the beginning of this recording, where you didn't ask for help in the past year, or you can look at a new situation that is perhaps current and concrete for you. So imagine you could ask anyone for help, and in the next 3 minutes, answer the next 3 questions. So what would, asking yourself in the third person, so for me it would be, what would Juliet do? What would a good friend say? And what would a wise person say? So perhaps stop the recording right now, press pause, and take 3 minutes to answer these 3 questions. And when you're finished, welcome back. Take a moment just to observe what you've written, and perhaps just take a moment to notice what changes for you. What changes for you when you ask yourself these wisdom questions. So if we were to be perhaps a little wiser in asking for help, what could be the benefits of that? Well, first of all, one of the big benefits is that it makes people feel good. I for one, certainly in the profession that I have, I love helping people. And I have to admit to my great shame that I am less good at asking people for help. So that's why I wanted to share this topic with you as well. So it makes us feel good. It deepens our relationships. It opens up the possibility of working with greater creativity, of working with greater intelligence. It gives other people opportunities for growth and learning, and it gives us the opportunity to create community as well around an idea and to give it life. One example that comes to mind is of a former colleague, and she told me that one of her mentors was actually a member of the board. And given that at the time she was probably at middle manager level, it was in a huge multinational organization, that was pretty impressive that she'd managed to bag herself a member of the board as one of her mentors. And so I asked her, okay, so how did that happen? And she said, I just asked. So don't underestimate the power of just asking, and don't underestimate how much other people will actually be willing to give of their time, their resources to you if you ask in the right way. And just to conclude that story, thanks to just asking, she was actually able to evolve quite quickly within the organization. She got promoted several times over the following years. And that was really thanks to her mentoring relationship and being able to be more visible and to speak about her work more widely and in a more positive way. And thinking about, again, not underestimating others' willingness to help us out. Steve Jobs, when reflecting upon the beginning of his career in an interview, he said, I've never found anyone who's said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. So that's food for thought from the amazing Steve Jobs. Okay, so we are warming to the idea of asking. So how can we do that? Is there a particular art to asking others that will get us a positive and accepting response? Well, the answer to that is yes. And here are a few considerations to reflect upon before asking for help. So first of all, why am I asking? So what is the purpose in your making this request? And why is it that you are asking that particular person? What is it about them that you are making this request for? So why is it them in particular that you're asking? So it could be one person, it could be a group of people as well. And then what specifically are you asking for? Now, really, really, really important point when it comes to our own needs, our own requests, people aren't mind readers. Even our nearest and dearest, we don't underestimate how even our loved ones can struggle to know what our needs are. It's really important to be able to express what's the need and what specifically is the request that you're making. So very, very important point about being specific and not being in a posture of thinking that the other person is going to magically guess. A few other considerations. So what, if this person accepts your request for help, what could be the positive consequences of that? How are you going to ask them? If it's somebody you know, are you going to pick up the phone? You're going to send them an email? How are you going to do that? Or if it's someone you don't know, how could you approach them? is it somebody that you would need to be introduced to, for example? And how is it that you can show consideration and respect for this person? And, again, with this idea of going back to, what could get in the way, the idea of I might be bothering them, but, you're not bothering them, but, how is it that I can show that I am being considerate of who they are and what their schedule is like? And then finally, and this is a really important point as well, and often one that is missed, and it's really showing not only gratitude, but also what's the impact? What's been the positive impact of receiving that help? What has been the result or outcome that you can then show to the person that has accepted your request? So some food for thought there on preparing to ask for help. Heidi Grant is a social psychologist and author of various books, and she has done quite a bit of research into the power of asking for help. And a couple of things that I wanted to share with you from her work were really quite significant and interesting. One is that 90% of help that co-workers give to one another in the workplace are in the response to a specific request. So this idea of being specific is absolutely key in successfully getting a yes. And then you are 34 times more likely to get a yes if you ask in person. Really interesting. So by in person, what she means here is either face-to-face or by phone. And thinking back to the live webinar that we had last week, there was quite a bit of debate around this. One of the participants was sharing that she actually in her job relies a lot upon getting other people to do things, and she will generally use the phone for that. And what she said was, you know what, when you're asking for help from somebody, you're actually asking for a piece of who they are. And I thought that was absolutely the wonderful thing to say. And she said, if that's what you're asking, then you also have to give a piece of who you are. So again, there's this idea of vulnerability and connection in making a request for help. And there were other participants who weren't so comfortable with that idea. They felt that perhaps face-to-face was could be a little bit confrontational or putting people on the spot, and perhaps sending an email would give them the opportunity just to reply or respond in their own time. But one thing that Heidi Grant says is that with email, it's actually easier to say no. And, I, for one, when it comes to not getting responses to emails, there is a little bit of my soul that gets smaller when I don't get replies to emails. Okay, so a couple more tips and food for thought there when it comes to asking for help to move towards a yes. Now, what could be the pitfalls to avoid and which may stymie you in your request for help? First thing is not to be apologetic. So don't go in there saying, I'm really sorry, I don't want to bother you. If you're apologetic about your own request, what does that say about, how you see this other person? So be confident in the fact that this request is absolutely valid and you're really looking to connect with this person. Second thing is being vague. Be really careful about that. And I can remember recently, and I cringe while I say this, I had a call with somebody in my network, and it was actually somebody with whom I could have established an opportunity for business. And I went into the call. It was a catch-up call, and I actually didn't prepare at all. And I really went into it with the idea of it just being a catch-up and not seeing it as an opportunity for business. And towards the end of the conversation, he said to me the famous words, "So, how can I help you?" And I totally froze, and I was so embarrassed because I hadn't prepared at all. And even worse than that, I had perhaps covertly made the assumption that he was actually going to come up with an idea or tell me about an existing opportunity. And, I hadn't actually expressed any request or need when the door was wide open. So, moral of that story is be prepared, be specific. Next thing is to avoid being transactional. And by transactional, an example of this would be, I can remember a while back, somebody in my network, I thought of that person for a business opportunity. And I offered them the opportunity, having in mind just that, I actually wanted to give them a helping hand because they were starting out in their business, but also as somebody who I respected and I really valued their work. So when we discussed this opportunity, he actually started to talk about, giving me a commission and, perhaps looking at ways in which we could find leads for one another. And I actually found that a big turn off because that was not at all my intention. My intention was to have been helpful. So be careful about being transactional and, be generous about both offering and accepting. It's important to be generous in accepting help. Next thing is making sure there's a balance in the exchange. And by exchange, that's actually different from transactional. So making sure there's a balance in the giving and the receiving. If there's imbalances, if somebody is either giving more or receiving more, this can often lead to entanglements and situations where people get rejected or things just don't turn out so well. So the important thing, absolutely key here when it comes to the idea of exchange, is ensuring that there are clear boundaries and those are contracted. So for example, if you are making a request for help, so let's say from a mentor, what exactly are you asking from them? And what are you asking from them in terms of their time and also the period of time that they are going to be your mentor for? So really putting some very clear boundaries around that of who does what in the exchange, and that's balanced. Next thing to avoid is drama. We all love drama, particularly in organizations, because it's fun. And one pitfall to avoid here is really a kind of a rescuer victim dramatic relationship. If you are somebody who likes helping, then it's really important to not be a savior of others, or to, you're not there to rescue them. It's really important to, whether you're coming as a helper or a person that's being helped, it's really important in the relationship to view everybody as responsible and resourced. And the final thing, just to reinforce fully what I was saying earlier about follow-up, it's really important to show what the impact was, as well as being thankful towards the person who gave that help. Really nice example that I saw on Twitter recently of getting help from the wisdom of crowds. Now, Celine Schillinger put out a request on Twitter. Now, she's somebody who is very active on Twitter and is also very good at cultivating relationships online and being very generous in offering help. But also, she's been, in this instance, quite humble and bold in the way she's asked for help. So she's asked a question around a challenge that she's faced with a client. And she's asked her network, when a client shows no appetite for what they contracted you to do, what do you do? So she's put out this request for help. And then she gets a response from 30 people, which is pretty impressive. And the key there is that she's built these relationships. So that's really important when it comes to getting acceptance and asking for help. So it's really important to invest in your relationships. So she gets input from 30 experts. It's very diverse, it's very wise, it's really quite fascinating, the responses that she gets. So what does she do then? Well, obviously she shows that she's grateful, but actually then she goes one step further and she actually collates all of the inputs that she's had and she writes a blog and she actually creates a really valuable piece of content that she then shares back with her network. So if you want to read this blog, you can click here, and there is also the link to Celine's site. But that's a really, really nice example of how you can work with speed, intelligence, and diversity online and work with the wisdom of crowds. I'm going to invite you into another reflective exercise now and think back to a time when you did ask for help. Think back to a time when you did ask for help. Who did you ask? How did you ask them? And what was the impact on you? What was the impact on others? So take a moment now. Pause the recording if you wish and have a think about the time when you did ask for help. That help was accepted and had a positive impact. So who did you ask? How did you ask them? And what was the impact on you and on others? And once you have completed the reflective exercise, how is it that we can now bring this all together and start practicing asking for help more? I'm going to invite you into another journaling exercise now. So think of a current and concrete challenge where you could benefit from help. Think of a current and concrete challenge where you could benefit from help. And again, time yourself, give yourself a couple of minutes and write down 5 low-risk actions that you can take. 5 low-risk actions that you can take. So give yourself a couple of minutes, pause the recording if you need to. And when you have done that, you've got your 5 low risk actions. Take 2 more minutes and write down 5 more. So 5 more low risk actions. And when you have completed that, you're going to have 10 low risk actions that you can take. And just so you know, for the second exercise, so for the second set of 5, that's actually a really useful exercise because it actually gets the creative part of your brain working. So now you're going to take action and ask for help more. And I'm going to conclude with a final thought and coming back to this idea of ecosystems, of communities. What if we were to invest in creating helpful communities? And here I wanted to evoke the idea of it takes a village. It takes a village or a community to raise a relationship, a career, an idea, a project. How can we think about bringing that to life in our organizations? Thank you very much for listening. If you have any feedback, any questions, or you would like to contact me to talk about coaching or consulting needs, then please feel free to harness the power of asking and drop me an email. Or you can call me. My number is 00336 16024375. Thank you again for listening. And I wish you a wonderful remainder of the day.